Hi, Merch Money. We are here with Christine today. Everybody's been so excited for this show. So welcome, Christine.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here.
Yeah. Well, everybody always loves all your artwork. And for anyone who doesn't know Christine's artwork, I linked her Facebook group in the description so you could check it out there. And if you type in Inktober in our Facebook and several other Facebook groups, you'll see all Christine's drawings for Inktober, which were amazing. So definitely check out her artwork. You will be impressed.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And if any of you know BJ DeLong's Facebook group, Christine usually participates in the weekly challenge, and I always look forward to seeing her artwork each week. So yeah, I'm a big fan girl.
There's so many amazing artists in that group. It's incredible.
It is.
I don't even know if I'm in that Facebook group. I was just thinking about it. I'm like, am I in that one? Maybe I'm not.
We'll drop a link.
Join it.
Yeah. Join it. It's so incredible. There's so many amazing artists that are posting things all the time. So
I met BJ at the Columbus meetup, and he's been on this show, and I watch his YouTube channel. But thinking about it, I'm like, I don't know if I'm in his Facebook group. So sorry, BJ. I will join right after this call. But anyway, so Christine, tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you get into art and print on demand and all of that?
Yeah, so I've been drawing since I was a kid. I was one of those kids that would draw on the desks at school. I couldn't help myself. Got in tons of trouble for it. And just if there was something blank, I had to draw on it. When I was in high school, I took all the art classes they had. I graduated with a studio art degree. And so I was a working artist long before I was in print on demand. But the problem with the studio art degrees at the time was they didn't teach you the business side of it. So they kind of, you learn how to draw, but you didn't learn how to do anything with it. And so a lot of art majors were graduating and putting stuff online and then just assuming things would work out. And that's not how any of that works. And so I was trying to figure out why none of my stuff was selling over the many years. And I finally stumbled on print on demand. And about 3 or 4 years ago, I think I found print on demand, and I joined Merch by Amazon about 3 years ago and got involved in all the big merch communities, which have been incredible. And I've learned so much about business now that has really helped me out. But yeah, I think I've always felt like starting from that art background helped because I never was wondering what to put up. I started off, I got out of tier 10 and then immediately to tier 100 almost instantaneously. And then I sort of floundered because I didn't know how to do the research and I didn't know how to do any of that. But it was nice coming from an art background where I understood trademark and copyright, and I understood the basics of design. I wasn't worried about trying to find a designer. I knew how to do all of that stuff. And I was always comfortable with Photoshop. So I've always kind of thought that helped me out just a bit. So.
Nice. So when you graduated art school, did you immediately go off on your own, or did you have a job somewhere, or how did that work?
So yeah, I actually I was working part-time throughout college, but before I graduated, I got a job with an art museum, and I've actually been with them ever since. So I've been with them for 17 years, and I stepped down as the visitor services manager in May because of health reasons. And sort of threw myself 100% full-time into this, hoping that I can kind of build it up with the little nest egg I've developed from working at the art museum. And so, I was there full-time, which is hard to kind of balance working an independent business with doing that full-time. And so art had always kind of been, I always called myself an artist. In fact, my boss knew that and always laughed and said, if you ask what I do, I'll always tell you that I'm an artist. And so she knew that that's what I always thought of myself as, even though I was the visitor services manager. So
great. Well, that's great that you were able to get a job at a museum and all of that. I actually volunteered at the art museum at my college at Rutgers, the Zimmerli Art Museum. And I was, for some reason, thinking I was going to be like an art gallery director or something, but every job I could find was not paid, and I really wanted to get a paying job after college, and I was the oldest of 8 kids, so I did not want to have to move back home and have all these little kids around. I'm like, I need a job.
Yeah.
So I was doing art history and business school at the same time. I double majored. So I had the business school, and I just went that direction of business and completely dropped off art. So I did no art from college till I found print on demand. So I kind of let that whole side of me atrophy or whatever you want to call it. Right. But it's nice to bring art back. I'm really excited about that with print on demand.
Yeah.
So while you were working at the art gallery, were you meeting artists or the museum? I mean, were you meeting artists, or how were you keeping your art going?
Yeah. So a lot of the people that we hire, especially in my department, are either working artists or their art history focus, or, they have some sort of passion about art, but there's a ton of working artists throughout the museum and all the different departments. But really, most of my focus and interaction were with the people in my department. And so a lot of us were fueling ideas off of each other. And so, artists, especially at the time, we all have a tendency to flounder and take like months to finish an idea, which is not how print on demand works. And I very much appreciate that it's, much quicker, and I can get things done so much faster than before. And so all of us would talk about these grand ideas, and then it was hard for any of us to finish anything. But we would all fuel each other. Somebody would bring an idea to the table, and we'd all talk about how cool that was. And then somebody else would have another idea, and we'd all just kind of feed off of that. And I've always appreciated that environment, because I feel like creativity breeds creativity. And so when you're surrounded by people that are creative, it helps you be more creative than you would have been otherwise. And so I've always loved it. And we have working artists this year, we have a lot of them that are beginning to transition, working more and more into their art. And so that's also great, seeing them like jump more into what their focus is and what they're doing. So yeah, it's definitely a nice environment.
So exciting. Yeah. So when you're around artists or your artist friends, how do they feel about print on demand? Does it feel like a sellout kind of thing, or does it feel like a dream come true, or does it, how do artists feel about it?
Right. So the art world is a very fickle community, and that's always been my issue, is trying to be a working artist, is when you get really deep into the art world, it can get very trying to say this in a nice way, but it can get very arrogant almost in how they view artists. But working artists often don't have that view of each other. We're all working. We all know what it's like to sort of struggle and to trying to pay the bills. And you're working for an art museum, which is a nonprofit, so you're not making a lot of money. And we all know what that's like. It's once you start getting entrenched into the deeper levels of it that you run into those other sort of bigger issues, where they would view this as being a sellout, that, they'll support artists up until they're successful. And then it's kind of like, oh, well, now you're successful. Now you're a sellout. You're catering to too many people. It's like, well, yeah, but like, that's the point. Like, how else are we supposed to make money and like create a living if we don't make enough money? And so the art world has that weird vibe about it sometimes. But working artists, I've never found that to be true at all. Because we're all kind of on that playing field of understanding that the art world is likely only going to accept a small percentage of any of us, and we still have to make money, and so we'll look for ways to make money. And so I think I had talked about Merch by Amazon with several of them, and I know at least one of them did join. I think she got in, but she left soon after, and so we haven't really talked about it. So I don't know how she's doing with it, but so yeah, we're always the artists themselves are always looking for ways, and it's fine. It's just if I kept trying to be an artist, there would inevitably be barriers that I'd have to overcome. But
yeah, it's one of those things where I think art is one of those things where you have to be passionate to do it, and it's that thing of, do you want passion or money? Like, a lot of people think it's one or the other, like you can't have both.
Right.
So a lot of artists, it's their passion. They don't want to draw something that they're not interested in or something like that. So I can kind of see that point of view. But I feel like with you were able to bring your passion into art and tie in print on demand. Is that true?
Yeah. I know I have a lot of people that follow me, because the way I don't typically do designs that are like text-based. I do a lot of graphic heavy designs, which I love to do. It takes me a long time though. It takes me about a day to do a design, so I work pretty slowly, but I also know that what I'm producing is a pretty detailed graphic that hopefully will appeal to people. And I just think of the shirt as a different, it's a canvas. It's just a different kind of canvas. And so I think I have maybe 2 or 3 designs that actually have text on them, and everything else is a 100% graphic of some kind. And so, yeah, I'll work all day on a new design every day that's centered around my brand and sort of build it up and work on it. And I love it. It definitely is like the print on demand industry is like a mirroring of everything I love to do. And then my brand is mirroring my love of the outdoors as well. So I've been able to pull in like all of my passions into one thing, which is fantastic, because then you don't burn yourself out as easily,
That's so exciting. I'm so excited to meet you, because I wish that could be something to share with artists. It doesn't have to be one or the other. There is a way to tie in all your passions. You're in control of it. So, well, that's a lot of artists. I think they just get into sucked into just having a job somewhere and then doing their art separate, because they can't figure out a way to not sell out or whatever you want to call it. So they do their art and it just sits in their room, and then that's it. Nobody ever gets to see it. And I think that's sad. I love that you've been able to put your art out into the world and take advantage of print on demand and all of that.
Yeah, I think I've been really lucky and finding like print on demand, the 4 years ago or whatever, and then finding Merch by Amazon, and then finding these communities. I've been so lucky to be surrounded by so many great people. So yeah, it's been great.
Fantastic. And the art that you do you put it on t-shirts, or do you put it on other products? Like, is merch your main thing, or do you do Etsy? What's your main focus?
Yeah, so I would actually say my main focus is probably Etsy and my own website. Merch has become a little bit secondary. My designs don't sell as well on merch, but the same designs sell decently on Etsy. And which I think, Etsy is just sort of that more artistic market. So I think that makes sense. And then I've been building up a Facebook page to drive traffic to my website. So I've been doing all of that for over a year now. And it's not just shirts, though. So I have on Etsy, I think it's shirts and pillows, but mostly shirts. But on my website, it's shirts and art prints and pillows. So
I was going to say, I think pillows and canvases and art prints and things like that would probably be really good for your artwork.
Yeah. So yeah, they work out well with the right print on demand provider. There's a lot of really good people that print fantastic art prints or pillows and stuff like that. So I've gotten samples from a lot of different companies, and there's several that are really good. So
great. Which companies do you prefer the best for prints and things like that?
So well for shirts, I prefer Shirtly. When I've compared several different companies, I think Shirtly edges them out. For prints and for pillows, I prefer Printful. They're print. So there's when you're printing anything, inevitably there's a lot of darkening that can happen. And so if you're not familiar with them, like most companies you work for, you'll have to significantly lighten an image in order for it to pop, especially if it's dark to begin with. But Printful has been, I think, one of the only companies I've seen that has a great balance of printing things light enough on paper or on canvas that it's not just sort of fading if you didn't quite bump the contrast or the highlights up enough. So,
well, that's really great to know. Thank you. Yeah. And I love that you have your own website and that you're building up a Facebook page. I think that's so important for artists because you have a unique style. It's so different. Like everybody's different on how they go about doing print on demand. Some people, merch is better. They do a lot of text-based designs and they have a wide range of niches. But if you're an artist with a distinct art style, I really think a website, a Facebook group, that's the way to go because you have that unifying thing. This is your artwork. This is, your style.
Yeah. Well, and you had Rachel Miller on just a few weeks ago, and it was from her that I learned to build up my Facebook page. So that's been really helpful too. So
yeah. Do you have an Instagram account too, or you're sticking with Facebook?
I do have an Instagram account, but I haven't posted any of my artwork to it because to manage everything I'm doing, I haven't quite worked in that into my flow. And so all I'm posting on there, I'm posting once a day, and it's just my hiking pictures, which I have because I focused on photography for years after I graduated. And I still do. And so I'll take trips to hike and I'll bring my camera with me. And so I have thousands upon thousands of photographs that were just sitting on my computer with nothing to do. And so I've been posting those onto my Facebook page, and then every night I post them onto my Instagram as well. So that's all I have on there are my photographs. So.
I love that. I feel like you don't even realize how you're just naturally good at tying everything together and keeping things cohesive. So your Facebook page is very cohesive of all your artwork, your Instagram, I haven't even seen it, but from what you're saying, sounds like it's cohesive with hiking and nature and all of that. And you're taking time to follow your passions. I think that's so important for art. Like you got to get outside and, being creative is one of those things where you can't just like work all the time and like hustle all the time. Like, so what do you feel about that?
It's definitely, well, and so nature is such a big passion of mine, and it always has been. And so I've tied in, my love of passion for nature, the environment, climate change, like all of that, because I know like it doesn't matter how bad my day was at work or whatever. If you take a hike in nature, like everything's better. And I felt that power. I'm a hiker. I speak that language. I know what it's like to throw a backpack on filled with water and other supplies and go out hiking for eight or more hours, and just be surrounded by nothing but the countryside. I know what that's like. And so I can kind of speak that language. I know what some of the struggles are. I know what, people are passionate about. I know how those hikes and how that resonates with people, and that healing power that a lot of hikers will talk about, and how just getting away and doing that, and it's still work related, like it can still tie in, but it's also completely getting away from everything and disconnecting. And I mean, in May, I'm planning to go to Yellowstone for the first time, and I'm so excited about that. But I obviously won't be able to draw when I'm there, but I'll be surrounded by nature and taking more photographs and adding more to that, what I can put on my Facebook page and talk about. So yeah.
Wow, I love it. And Teresa's asking you if you combine camping with your hiking.
I have in the past. I haven't camped, in far too long. I would love to go camping again, though. It's not something that I'm adverse to. It's just something I haven't had a chance to in a long time. But yeah, I would love to. And I do sometimes post stuff about camping. It's just, it's been a while. But that's also like when you camp, like it completely disconnects. It's a great way to really like get out and disconnect and just be out in nature. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know we're going to have you share your screen to talk about color theory and all of that. But before we do that, I just wanted to say, where do you think that how do you nurture your creativity? Is it from being outdoors? Is that what you feel like nurtures your creativity? Or is that more like just another passion of yours that you're tying in? Like, how do you keep creative and keep passionate?
Well, I think all artists are inspired by everything around them.
Mm-hmm.
And, we see it a lot in like at the art museum, we would talk about it a lot when I would lead tours or whatever else, is even if an artist is choosing not to respond to something, it's a response. Like everything in an artist's life, from the people we interact with to the things that we see on the news to all the habits and passions that we have tie into our art in some way, because we can't separate that. Our art is a reflection of part of who we are. I mean, a lot of mine is currently inspired by nature, but I work on a lot of stuff on the side too that's dealing with that are more fully finished, like artwork pieces. And I love it when I can mirror both of those together, which every once in a while I can, the print on demand with a fully like finished work of art. But I think everything does. We're inspired by other people. We're inspired by nature. We're inspired by just these things that are all around us. So
nice. And do you feel like it's the things that you like around you that inspires you the most, or do you think it's the things that you find wrong or that make you unhappy? Like, where do you think what's the emotion that drives you the most, do you think?
Both. Both the things that I love and the things that I don't love. So particularly as an artist, like when I'm focusing on creating like a full art piece, and not necessarily a print on demand piece, I'm often looking at climate change is a big passion of mine, and how much humans destroy everything that we kind of touch, which sounds like a very negative thing, but I have a lot to say about it when I'm creating art pieces, and I've done some things that, tie back into that. And so sometimes it's the things I hate that are driving the things that I'm creating, the things that I wish would change in the world. And just how humans can be so mean to each other. Some of that will come through in my artwork. More so than, so when I'm working on my brand, I'm focusing on animals and nature, but it's also coming from that point of, wanting to save the environment and wanting to help animals. And if you're spreading a love of animals into the world, then people will maybe also love the animals and not want to hurt them as much or farm them as much. Or maybe we can, help fight for orangutans or whatever it is. If we're sort of spreading that love and that passion, I think people will respond to it. So it's kind of all tied to that. So it's both my love of things and my hate of things. So, or things that I wish would be different, or things that I wish I could change. So
amazing. I'm so impressed with how you tie everything together. It doesn't seem like you would run into I want to say writer's block, but that's not what it's called for artists. But it doesn't seem like you would have days where you can't think of anything to do or where you get discouraged. But I don't know, do you? Because it feels like you have this very strong why, and you tie in everything that you like all together. So it feels like you would be able to just keep going. But do you have days where you just feel discouraged or stuck?
Every once in a while. Well, and what's funny is, and I've mentioned this to some of my coworkers too, is, a lot of what I do are animals, and there's billions upon billions of animals in the world. And every once in a while, I'm like, gosh, I'm out of animals. What should I draw? Oh, maybe one of the other billions of animals that exist in the world that I could find stuff on. But sometimes I do. Sometimes, which some of it is that, if you're not making money, there's a little bit of discouragement. Every once in a while that happens with that little bit of panic where I'm like, you know what, it's fine. I just have to keep pushing through that and it'll be okay. But typically with my art, I don't hit like a full out block outside of that moment of pondering in the morning, like what animals exist in the world? What, how do I do this? Like, oh, right, there's a million of them. Let me just look them up and figure out what to do. And sometimes some drawings are much more intensive than others, particularly things with scales. So like snakes or lizards, or I just did a pangolin a few days ago, and I was resisting doing the pangolin for a while because I knew it was going to take me a while because the scales take a while to flush out. But I'd seen a couple of times, and I took the second time I saw it as a sign that I should do it, that they're being hunted for their scales. And so I was like, okay, so I need to do something about that, because I feel like that's something that is concerning. They're being hunted on a wide scale in Africa because they think their scales have healing properties, and so they're being killed and being pushed to the edge of extinction. And so I decided to do it. And so sometimes that'll pop up where I'll see something about an animal that if you do research on, not a lot of people are looking for. But if I see the news article a couple of times, I'm like, oh, you know what? I should do that because that animal is in a bad state. And, if I can bring awareness to it or something, maybe that'll help. So.
Sorry, I keep asking more questions instead of going to the sharing the screen part, but I love this. So you have so much to say, and I think this will help so many people. I was just going to say, I think a lot of artists and people in general get stuck where they feel they're not inspired, they're discouraged, they just get stuck. Have you ever felt like that? Like, or how did you figure out this really good balance of hiking and outdoors and your passions about the world and your art? How did you put it all together so seamlessly? Was it always like that?
It wasn't. No. Well, so I have been a hiker for a long time, and a lot of my photography for years was dealing with outdoors and me hiking. Even when, so I took a hiatus from drawing for maybe about 3 years after I graduated, because I was burnt out. At that point, I was burnt out after going through college, and they push you and push you and push you to do all of these things.
It's not stuff you want to do.
Right. It's not always like, it's not something you're passionate about. It's assignments, and you've got to constantly create for all of these different classes. I was burned out at that point. And so I did stop creating and drawing for a long time. And I got into photography. It was one of the last classes I took was darkroom photography, and I loved it. That professor was one of my favorite professors. and definitely got me passionate about it. And so I started taking photographs, and I was already somebody who hiked a lot. So I just started taking photographs when I was hiking. And then I had my photographs up on a website, in the unfortunate belief that it would just sell, right? As all the artists seem to unfortunately get sort of caught up in, where we're not taught the business side. And then, of course, none of them sold because I wasn't doing anything with it except existing. And so I was taking photographs for years and years. And then I started drawing again, and I remember why I loved it. And in 2012, I discovered digital art. One of my friends, one of my coworkers, showed me a piece that she'd done digitally, and I was like, "What is this amazing thing?" Because always the problem with the art that I always sort of ran into is I'm not a painter. I've taken painting classes in college. I've certainly gone that route, and I don't have the control that I like. I like the fine control that I have with pencil, and so I was using colored pencils, but there are some limitations working with colored pencils on paper. And so it wasn't quite jiving exactly how I'd want. I was still creating stuff, but it wasn't, the images were harder to flesh out with color pencil.
Mhm.
But it is probably my second best medium. If I ever step away from digital art, it's color pencil and then pen. I love working with both of those. But digital art kind of mirrored everything that I love about drawing with all of the capabilities that painting had. I could saturate the color like you can with painting, and it didn't have to work up and build up and have the issues that you have with colored pencil, but I had the fine point control that I have with drawing. And so at that point I started drawing again, but it didn't immediately mirror to the hiking. So that came about as I started building a brand. So on merch, because I joined Merch by Amazon right before the solar eclipse.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was a few months before that, and I didn't know the research at the time to know that I should have jumped into that. And I realized my mistake after it was over and it was too late. And I was like, oh, I should have done that. But I was just sort of throwing up designs and trying to follow what the community was suggesting on research and this trend and that trend, and not really having a ton of success. And so I took a year off from doing Merch by Amazon completely. And that's when I did the Facebook page with Rachel Miller. And that's when it all kind of started mirroring, was when I started thinking about how to, because I know enough, having been a working artist for a while, that if you're not passionate about what you do, you're going to hit a brick wall. And at some point you're going to feel like you're done and need to walk away from it. And I didn't want to get to that point. And so I had an epiphany taking in her free group. I think it was before I even signed up for her class, that I could sort of mirror both of them together. And then from there, I learned how to build the brand, and it all just sort of kind of fell into place at that point. So yeah, it was a long journey.
Amazing story. I'm so glad we dug into that, because even me talking to you, I was like, man, she's just always had it so like perfectly put together. It just felt so seamless.
Right.
And I think that's so important for people to remember, like, just because it seems seamless now, it was not always seamless for any of us.
No.
And it takes a while to try to figure out your purpose, or how to tie everything together, how to make money from something that you like, whether you even want to do that. It's a whole journey, and I'm so happy that it's coming together for you. And
it's been great. I mean, just the last year alone, I feel like I'm going in the right direction. Like I don't feel like I'm there yet, but I feel like everything's kind of falling into place. All the foundations are being built up. Like I'm feeling confident finally that I'm heading in the right direction. But yeah, it takes a while. It's something that's always stuck with me. It was something that for years I've always thought about is, we always think, gosh, I wish I'd started this last year because I would be so much further. And then every year it's, oh gosh, I wish I'd started this last year. And 5 years later, you're still thinking, gosh, I wish I'd started this 5 years ago when I first had the thought to start this, until you finally do it. And then it'll take a few years, but once you just do it, it doesn't have to be perfect. You just have to start it. Then you're finally taking those steps, and you'll be further than you were a year from now, and it'll just slowly build up. So
amazing. Well, I know that you really have so much artistic talent to teach all of us. So many people don't have that art background. So let's dive in. You wanted to talk about color theory.
Yeah, and maybe some rules of composition if there's time. I don't know.
Yeah, whatever. And we don't have to, it's totally up to you. We don't have to stop right at 9, whatever you have time for.
Oh, I don't know. I can go down rabbit holes. I don't know that you want me to give me that freedom.
We would love to hear anything you have to teach us.
Yes.
And Christina, was there anything that you wanted to say or anything in the chat that we may have missed?
No, I think everyone is just kind of like hanging on Christine's every word. So there's been a few great comments that Christine has such a wonderful mindset, and just a lot of people who are liking and sharing and everything. So I think it's phenomenal.
Well, thank you guys. All right.
Yeah.
Oh, perfect. I see the screen. Let me add it. There we go.
Everything's up. Okay.
Yep.
So color theory, and a lot of people may know a lot about color theory already, but I'm going to just sort of start at the beginning.
Perfect.
So with color theory, there's 3 primary colors, and those are blue, red, and yellow. There we go. So in theory, if you were a painter, for instance, you'd only need to buy those 3 colors. Those 3 colors make everything else, with the exception of white. But white is really the absence of color, so it can't make that. And from those 3 colors, we have the secondary colors, and the colors are green, orange, and purple. And so yellow and blue make green, blue and red make purple, red and yellow make orange. So they all kind of make each other. Now, if you Google it, you can find tons of color wheels online, and I think they kind of overcomplicate things because you don't really need it to be complicated. I think it's a lot easier when it's kept as simple as possible, because then you can see everything you need to see here. All of the interactions of the colors are going to come from these 6 colors. So you can see color wheels where they go deeper and you start talking about the tertiary colors, but I don't think you really need it. All of the interactions are here. So from these colors, we have a lot of interactions happening, the first of which are called complementary colors. So complementary colors are colors that are opposite each other on the color wheel. So for instance, red and green are complements. We see that all the time around December. Blue's complement is orange, and then yellow's complement is purple. And there's several reasons why these work. So complementary colors are colors that make the other color pop. And so you're completing a basic color wheel within a complement. So you have, for instance, you would have red, which is a primary color, and then you have green, which is made from the other 2 primary colors of yellow and blue, and thus you're completing a color wheel. Now, it's very basic. It doesn't replace the color wheel, but that's one of the reasons. Another reason is you always have a warm color and a cool color within a complement. So warm colors are yellow, orange, and red. Warm colors are in your face. They're excitable. They push forward into the foreground. You want a subject to be a warm color. That's what's going to make it seem like it's closer. And then cool colors are green, blue, and purple. And they push back. They recede into the background. And they do a good job of supporting the warm colors in being sort of in your face. They're much more calming. And so if you're doing with like a landscape, or you're doing anything that you're trying to create depth, you can use warm colors and cool colors, where you have cool colors in the background, warm colors in the foreground, to create a sense of depth. And that's called atmospheric perspective. So I'm going to pop on a photograph real fast.
You should be a teacher, Christine. You're so good.
I know.
Anyway, I'll stop interrupting. Go ahead.
All right. So one of the reasons I like this photograph, so I actually took this in Sicily a few years ago, but one of the reasons I like this photograph is there's almost this clear line, and I'm going to draw that right here. There's this clear like ridge between warm in the foreground and cool in the background. And you don't often see that, especially not in photographs, not something that's so clear. But for whatever reason in this photograph, it worked out very well. So atmospheric perspective, it not only deals with color theory, but haziness. So in the foreground, you can kind of see that even the greens are a little bit warmer, right? Like they're not as cool as what you're going to see. Let me pull this up. They're not as cool as what you're going to see in the background back in here.
Yeah.
The greens are a little bit yellower. They're catching that light a bit more. They're more saturated with their color. And that's kind of atmospheric perspective. If you saturate a color close up and then make it bluer and hazier as it goes further away, you get this sense of depth that happens. And it works really great with landscapes. And I'll show some examples of that too. And so you can really flesh it out that way. There's also, the Impressionists were doing a lot of this where they were dealing with color theory. And they were doing things like not using black, for instance, as a shadower. And that's because blue, in my opinion, is the best shadowing color that you could possibly use. So the reason the Impressionists stopped using black is it's not a natural color. You don't find black in nature anywhere. You find, however, blue. Blue makes a great shadower. That's what we see when everything's getting dark. It's going to look really blue. Light has a temperature to it. And so shadows, and by their nature, are cooler, which is why blue works as such an effective shadower, as it's a cooler color. Purple can work as well, but blue, in my opinion, is one of the better colors to choose. But light has a temperature. Sunlight, for instance, in the morning is a cooler temperature than sunlight in the evening, which is a warmer temperature. So all light has a temperature to it. All light is warmer or it's cooler. Now, all light by its nature is warm, and all shadows by their nature are cool. But as you walk around, you can see it throughout the day, or even in your house. Different lights have different temperatures to them. But I'll show you some color theory if you ever wanted to adjust a photograph. If it's not saturated enough, if you work on the color balance. So if I come here to midtones and I redden it up, and then I come to highlights and I use yellow, and then I come to shadows and I use blue, it's really going to darken it, and it's going to saturate it in a way that flipping any of that color combination around wouldn't. Yellow does a great job of lightening. Red can add a lot of warmth to a subject, but blue can make it pop with the shadows.
Wow.
And I'm going to show some examples of that. This was actually one of my art pieces prior to getting into print on demand. So the fox is a very red kind of color, but because he's a red color, the background is blue. Even though it's this gray, it's in the blue spectrum. And then his shadows, his deep, deep, dark shadows here are also blue. And that works well to sort of make him pop. Blue darkens up really quickly. It's going to add a lot of depth really quick to a work of art. And even though it's almost black, we pick up the sense of blue. Our eyes pick it up. Human brains are amazing, and our eyes can pick up so much information. And while darkening up his red would certainly work, and black is certainly an effective shadower, blue, especially with a warm subject, is going to really add that little bit that's going to make it pop. Wow. I'm going to pop back to color theory because I also have an example here. So, for instance, if we were to take an orange ball and darken the orange, you get the effect that it looks like a ball instead of a circle. But if we were to add blue, that's sort of the different effect there. Now, the orange here and the blue are the same tone, but the blue looks darker because it's blue, and it darkens up really nicely. So I don't know if you can see that, how that doesn't look quite as dark and sharp as the blue does. But they're in the same, if I were to ping the orange here and then to ping that blue, they're going to pop up in the same, roughly the same range. I guess I'm a little darker with the blue, but. And so the blue really helps make that shadow really pop. And it doesn't seem like it would make sense because it's an orange ball. Why would you add blue? But it absolutely does. And our minds are really effective at looking at that and understanding that it's a shadow, which is the amazing part of how our minds work, is we can look at something and kind of discard miscellaneous information and be like, oh, this looks right, or it doesn't look right, or wow, that shadow really pops. And so it won't necessarily read as an orange ball with blue around it. It'll read as an orange ball with a deep shadow, which is incredible that our minds can do it.
Yeah.
Now I have one other color wheel that I made, which is really kind of a crazy scene, but that was just to show
I love it.
how all the colors interact. Yeah.
That is amazing.
Yeah. I wanted to do something that really kind of showed you what the complements look like on each other. So all of these are the complements on their respective colors. So the blue wedge has the orange birds, the green wedge has a red bird and part of the red train, the yellow wedge has that purple smoke, orange has the blue house and a couple of trees, and then the red wedge has the green shrubbery and trees. So
wow.
So you can kind of see how the complements make the other color pop. And even especially with the house, you can see how a cooler color wants to push further back and wants to push away from us and recede into the background, whereas a warmer color wants to come forward. The birds look like they're close, and the house looks like it's far away.
Yeah.
So
that's a great representation.
Thank you. I want to do something that kind of put it all together. So I thought this was a better way to do it, even if it looks insane.
I love it. I feel like I'm never going to forget this picture. That is so clear of exactly everything you need to know with color theory.
Right.
Oh
this
gosh.
Crazy color wheel that I've done, the color square, I guess it is.
I've never seen anything like this before. Amazing.
And so some of where it comes into play too, like not just with the fox I showed, but like
oh, so pretty.
Thank you. So if we look at this, like I've made the Mount Fuji in the background, it's a really light blue. And while the cherry blossoms are a really light pink, so that's going to dip into that warm color pushing forward. And even the white of the cherry blossoms is in a warmer spectrum so that it pushes forward from the blue of Mount Fuji in the background. And so little things like that will really start to come into play. This is another example. So you have the red dog with the green, and it's not quite the dramatic red that we see in Christmas, but it is still red. And so the green and the red really work well together to help make the dog pop and to help make the whole thing sort of work together. It also, oddly enough, follows the rules of composition. So do you have any questions about color theory?
Guys, any questions? How many people knew this already? I'm just curious. I had learned some about color theory, but it's been quite a while, and I've never had it explained so clearly and so succinctly. Like, that was amazing. Have you ever taught before?
Not art. I actually teach martial arts.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
There you go. You got your exercise in there. Oh my gosh, you're amazing. Yeah. Wow. You really could do a YouTube channel or be a teacher in some way, because that's a gift, the way you just explained that.
Oh, thank you. What's funny is I've actually thought about it. And this past year I started doing videos, and then I thought, what could I really offer that somebody else isn't already doing? And so I sort of discarded it all. But
yeah, I think that's the mistake people make, is they try to think of what other people are doing. Literally everything's been done before. So you could be like, well, Da Vinci did artwork, so I can't do artwork because he did it, or whoever. And it's like, no, it's like, this is a different time period. This is different. Right. The way you say something is different. Like I did take art classes and I did learn color theory, but I can tell you right now, I did not learn it like that. That was very clear, very quick. And the way you drew that picture, I mean, that will get into someone's brain and they'll never forget. It's so different than just seeing the color wheel. And you're like, okay, yeah, I get it. Roy G. Biv, like you kind of get it. But this is like, you get it when you see that picture. Yes. So I think you should definitely do videos and explain it, because you're going to explaining it in a much different way. And it's a very effective way.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
I appreciate it. Are you all ready to jump into composition?
Yes, absolutely.
Not too much information. I don't want to be too crazy and go down too many rabbit holes.
No, it's perfect.
All right. So composition is going to be a little crazier. Because there's a lot more to it. All right, so the first thing we'll talk about is the rule of thirds. The rule of thirds is the one that's thrown around the most. Have y'all heard of that before?
Just act like no one's ever heard of anything, because there are a lot of brand new people to the art world.
Okay. Yep. So the rule of thirds, if you divide your paper into 9 squares, which honestly, I've never figured out why it's called the rule of thirds, but that's fine. If you divide it into 9 squares, it's the idea that your subject, give me just a second, should not be here. You shouldn't have any lines going through the middle, either horizontally or vertically. Nothing should be in any of those spots. So it is more about, you want your subject here, 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 or here. And you want any lines going horizontally through these lines or vertical lines going through these guys. So the reason for that is if you have an object in the middle, it kind of looks like it's floating in Neverland. It's not grounded anywhere. It makes for a boring composition. So if you're drawing something and you offset it just a little bit, and it doesn't have to be a lot. So don't, I see a lot of people that are trying to follow the rule of thirds and they put their subject way over here with all of this space that's not part of their subject. So I wouldn't push it this far because then it also sort of unbalances your work. But if you just off-center it just that little bit, it makes for a more interesting composition for people to follow. And so I have, oh, nope, sorry, wrong thing. I'm not going to use one of my photographs, sorry. I'm going to use an old master painting to kind of demonstrate this. I'm going to change the color of this too so it pops better. Oh, that's probably not a good choice. So this is a work done by Caravaggio. And Caravaggio is one of my favorite artists. He was from the Baroque period. So, and let me sidebar real fast. So the reason the rules of composition exist, because I have a lot of people, or I've had people ask me, well, why does art have rules? It's the idea that as an artist, once someone's eyes leave your work, you've failed. And so the idea is you want to keep someone's eyes on your work as long as possible, because the longer they're looking at your work, the more likely it is they are to follow up and to look up who the artist is and to look up more things that you've done and to follow more of your pictures and to become a fan of yours. So all of the rules of composition are designed to keep someone's eyes on your work as absolutely long as possible so that you become someone that they want to follow and learn more about. So we can see here that his painting follows the rule of thirds. So that's because we're drawn to faces. The first thing that we look at in any image is a face. So the first thing we see is Bacchus's face here. And it's not in the center. It doesn't matter that his chest is in the center. His face isn't in the center. In fact, the entire line of movement is going to take our eyes around the center, and it's only going to dip into this top corner. So from his face, we're actually going to go on a journey, and we're going to follow his arm down because the highlight hits his shoulder here, and that's going to be the next spot we go. His arm leads us this way, and then we're going to get to the wine, which is another important piece for Bacchus. And then he has the white robes that are leading you back to his face. And what happens is we continue this, and we just go in circles because the design of the painting is meant for us to just do this circular round. So all of that kind of follows the rule of movement. So movement is meant to imply movement without necessarily someone moving. And it doesn't have to be that the figure's moving, but your eyes are moving around the canvas and staying on the canvas. For some reason, there's something in that design that's keeping you inside of it. So Bacchus follows that rule very nicely. And
I love how you explain things. I have to interrupt for a second to say that it's so intriguing, and it's so great the way you explain it. And I wanted to add one more thing about the like, why does art have rules? One of my favorite things about why I majored in art history is because it encompasses everything, like everything. So science, it follows rules because there's science. Like the whole world follows rules. All of our, like the way human faces look, they all have proportions that are universal, you know, certain distances between your eyes and between different parts, you know, it's all universal measurements, science, the world, there's perspective, all of it has real life measurements and things. So it mirrors the world with science, but it also shows history. It shows what's happening in the world. It shows emotion, like different times of art where, you know, there was wars or different problems, famines, and different things going on. It all reflects in the art. And then it also shows how different people affected different things. So when certain countries merged in different ways, all of a sudden the art would take on bits and pieces from that other culture. So I just find it fascinating. It encompasses everything, psychology, literally everything. You look at a piece of art and the amount that you learn is amazing.
Yeah, you really do. Well, and one of the things I love to talk about at the art museum is, history will present the facts, but paintings or art in general will show you how people felt about it. It's the psychological impact those facts had on that society at that time.
Right.
And so you see the devastation that people felt through the artwork, not necessarily through how we tell the history, but through the artwork. And you're right, there's so much that goes into it. I mean, we know psychologically, we look at faces first. And so you can use that to your advantage. And there's so many little details that are happening that masters were incorporating in their art, even back in the 1600s. They didn't necessarily have names for it because they understood these techniques worked. And now later on, we've applied names and can talk about why they worked. Yeah, it's fascinating. All right, so I have another image by Caravaggio, and this one's a little crazier, but I wanted to talk about it because, again,
I love that painting.
Yeah, right.
It's one of my favorites.
Fantastic. It follows the rules of space as well, and I can talk about that, as well as the rule of movement, the rule of thirds. So here's the rule of thirds on it. So, right, the only guy who's in the center is him, but he's weighted down, and he's not really, because his face is turned to us, he's not really our focal point. He's going to be important, though, as our eyes move around the canvas. So we're going to start, our eyes are going to jump to him because he's closest to the middle and his face is in highlight. And all of that's important. All of that's done intentionally so that we see him. And then his eyes are bouncing us this way. So the rules of movement work very nicely with the way people are looking. We follow the way that someone's looking. Now, what the genius of what Caravaggio did is this little part of the hat, this little darkening, actually bounces us back. And that's important for how we're going to go back through the whole painting. So we're bounced back, and then we're going to hit his arm and bounce up to his face. From his face, we have the hand that's also helping us along, but we're bouncing to him. We have him, he's looking down. And even though this guy's face is in shadow, it doesn't really matter. We're going to go down. His hands are making this almost movement like this, which is sending us across the table. We're going to follow his clothing and his arm up to his face, which is in highlight. He's looking this way, so that's where we're going to go. We have the hand that's leading us into the clothing, and this is actually a very dangerous spot. This is where Caravaggio could have absolutely lost our eyes because there's nothing here to keep us except the folds of the clothes. So whenever you're drawing something, if you have a moment where somebody could lead off the edge, if you have a circular curve, it'll lead their eyes back into the painting. And that's the genius of these folds. He doesn't have any of the folds going off the painting. He has them coming up this way. And that's exactly where our eyes are going to go, is to this guy. And he's looking this way. So we're back to his hand. His hand is going to help us bounce because his face is in half shadow. So we have a combination of this dramatic light coming in and his half shadow face kind of meandering us over. And we're going to hit his hand that's pointing, and we're going to bounce all the way back. And so that's how he's incorporated movement into his painting. And ideally, what's going to happen is we're going to take a while because there's a lot happening here, and our eyes are just going to be doing circles around this painting. And occasionally we might jump, but even if our eyes jump up to here, we have this dramatic light that's back down.
Yes. You showed a picture of you, I think you said it was Siena. Have you ever been to Tuscany?
I haven't been to Tuscany. I've been to Naples and Sicily, but no, not Tuscany.
It was amazing. When I was walking around, like anywhere you go, any church you walk in and there's paintings like that. Like it was just amazing. I studied abroad there for art history, and it was amazing. It was like it was such a different experience because I was used to just being at Rutgers in New Jersey, Zimmerli Art Museum, and like just looking at books. And then you go and you see it in real life, and you're just like, oh my God, Giotto. So I'm sure you know about Giotto. Like he's the one that did Weight, and his figures were like the beginning, early Renaissance, before the Renaissance. And so the Arena Chapel is it's in Padua in Tuscany, and you have to like sign up to go see it. And they make you go through this whole decontamination chamber, and you can only be in there for 15 minutes. So I got to do that and see it. And so you're actually in the chapel instead of just looking at a book. It's amazing.
That is amazing. I did go to Rome, and I have to say that Rome, I'm not a city kind of person. I'm a huge introvert. I don't like cities.
Rome scared me a little bit.
Rome is the only city I think that I would go back to. That's such a big city. Like I've been to London, I've been, to New York. I've been like, after a while, they're all kind of similar, but Rome, like there's art down every alleyway. There's, I saw Bernini's Fountain of the Four Rivers, which has been, I've looked at that in like history books, and to see it in person is incredible. So
I loved Rome, but you're right that it's that city feel. So like when I walked down somewhere, I don't know exactly, but there was somebody just like shooting their arm with heroin or some kind of drug. So I'm like, oh my God. But yeah, it was, definitely should go back, because there's so many places in Italy where it's just everywhere you go. It's absolutely incredible.
I would love to go back.
Yeah.
I know I've only seen like a little bit of it, and there's so much more to see. Yeah, it would be incredible. All right. So
sorry, distraction.
No, that's right. So, so that's kind of how our eyes go on a journey, but there's also the rule of space happening in here. So the rule of space, just indicates that if you have a figure that is looking or moving into a composition, and nobody's moving into it, but they're certainly looking that way, that they should be looking into the frame. So for instance, let me create another layer. So for instance, he is looking this way. He has all of this canvas to be looking into for our eyes to come this way. If he were turned around and we're looking out, our eyes would go out. And so the rule of space just means, you have these figures off to the left, they're looking to the right, and you have this figure off to the right who's looking to the left. And that's what that implies, is you want the figures to be looking or moving into the space that is the artwork, or is the canvas, or whatever that is. Having said that, the rule of space is one of the ones that I do break occasionally, because if you do flip it, let me see if I have a good example. Which I don't, but if you turn this boat around, and the boat were going this way, I have to draw on the right layer. If the boat were going this way, it leads us that way. But what it also does is it adds a sense of tension. So by the boat moving into the canvas, not only do we look into the canvas, but it gives us a sense of calm because we see what's ahead for it. Nothing's wrong. But by having the boat lead off, there's that little bit of tension that's added because we don't know what's about to happen. Are there rocks right there? Is it going to crash? And so every once in a while, I'll break that rule. But I think it's important to understand the rule so that you can break it. Because you can break the rules. Just if you understand what you're doing, it becomes a lot easier to break it. And so breaking the rule of space is certainly possible. It just helps to kind of understand that by doing it, you're taking a risk because somebody's eyes may then leave whatever work you've done and will be gone. Mm-hmm. Now, there's also, we like geometric shapes, so that also comes into the composition. So we are particularly fans of triangles. Psychologically, humans really like triangles. And so all of these ravens, for instance, and this is a very old work of mine, are triangles. So, you have a triangle, you have a triangle, and then they're triangles interacting with each other. We have a triangle here. And so there's triangles within triangles within triangles on this piece. And that's just something that we appreciate. So like when you're arranging candles or something in your home and you have 3 of them, we arrange it until it feels right. But if we have them all on the same level, it typically doesn't feel right. Something seems off about it. And we typically will arrange them in a way that becomes a triangular shape. It's just something that humans are naturally inclined to like. We also appreciate, so the rule of odd states that you should have odd number of figures in your image and not an even number. This also follows that. There are 3 ravens. And it's because if you have 2 or 4, or you have an even number, it looks like it's forced. It looks like it's more contrived to us. So as I mentioned before, the human brain is incredible. So if you're breaking the rules of composition, oftentimes what's happening is someone's looking at it and going, oh, something about this just doesn't feel right. And they may not know why, but all of these play to our psychology of things that appeal to us as humans and just things that tend to work well to keep us engaged and to have us look at something and for our eyes to stay focused and on the image without leaving it, and to consider us longer and for it to just feel good, basically, even if it's an unhappy image.
That's a good point. Make you feel good, even if it's an unhappy image. I like how you said that. Do you think that that's always true? Like you want to have that feeling where it's like a good composition, or if it is supposed to be ominous, is that a time when you'd want to break the rule?
Sometimes, yes. So if I want to add, that's one of the reasons I'll break the rule of space, for instance. I'm typically not going to break the rule of odds. So I'll typically always have an odd number of figures. But the rule of space, I like sometimes playing with that emotion, that tension that you can build up, if it's going to be an ominous sort of idea. The rule of third, people will play with them. I've seen artists break the rule of thirds intentionally. I'm often not, I don't feel like there's probably a right way to do it. I've never necessarily liked images that I've seen that have broken the rule of thirds. And movement you can certainly break if you'd like. But I think movement's sort of integral to sort of getting some eyes to move across your...
You need movement, definitely, yeah. Well, that looks great.
Another quick tip I'll say is if this raven here were at the edge, if he were over here basically, that is another trick to keep someone's eyes on the picture. So somebody looking out at us, engaging with us, bounces us back in, as long as their body is turned inward. So it wouldn't work if he were over here facing the same way. This wouldn't be a good side for him to be on. But over here, if he were aligned this way, looking out at us, it would naturally force our eyes back in. It's another trick where, if you just come to the edge, that engagement sort of stops us. When somebody's looking us in the eye, we're inclined to come right back in and to continue the journey that our eyes were taking. So there's tons of tricks. I think that's all of them, but I can kind of show you how that plays out. So this actually follows the rule of movement. The first thing we look at, obviously, is closer to his eyes, both eyes, actually. So we're going to see this before we see anything else. And then the little bit of green is going to lead us down. And if we bounce up, we actually have this clover that's going to send us back. The little bit of green bounces us down. So then you have the clover that loops this way, and then his chin and his ear that loop us up, and then the clover that loops us back in. So this is like a way for graphic design to do the same thing. So I know I was talking a lot about like full pictures, but with graphic design, it still works. And what's nice about this is it sends them back towards the eyes, towards the middle. And so then you're on this journey, this circular journey around your particular picture.
Wow.
So that's an example of how it can work in graphic design. And this would be another one. So this follows the rule of odds, right? There's 3 mountains, there's 3 birds, there's 1 hiker climbing 1 mountain here and 1 sun. So that follows the rule of odds, follows the rule of thirds, because nothing's like, I keep drawing on the wrong layer. Nothing's right here. And our eyes are going to hit him first because we're going to look for the human figure, even though we can't see the face. The way the rocks are shaped are going to kind of bounce us up to this bird. And even if we don't, if we make it over here, just the fact that there's an edge is going to send us in as well. The bird's wings are bouncing us over. We're going to end up sort of popping around to the mountain here, which is going to bounce us up to the bird. The bird's wings are angling us this way, which is bouncing us back in. And then we have this bird to bounce us back. So all of that's leading us around. We also have atmospheric perspective. So when I talked about color theory earlier, we have the saturated mountain that leads to a lighter color that is also a slightly bluer color, and it's not much, but it's a little, to another lighter color that's a slightly bluer color. By going gray and desaturating, you're trending towards a cooler color naturally. And so you have atmospheric perspective where it's getting hazy as it goes into the distance. You have the figure who's not moving off the edge, he's moving up, and we have elements that catch him to send us up. And so that's another example of how to use not only positive and negative space, but how to use all of those rules of composition to your advantage. So,
guys, type in the comments if you think that Christine should start a YouTube channel.
Man, I am just, I love it. I'm like, Michael kind of made the same comment that, he mentioned, he said, that's exactly the way my eyes went. And that was the same thing I noticed. So it's just amazing the way she explains it. And like, you realize that's exactly what your eyes did. So.
Yeah. Well, and honestly, all of us have those instincts, and we'll typically design until something feels right. And when it feels right, you're probably following all the rules of composition. It's just, if I'm working on something and it's not working out, I'll often take a step back and go, okay, what's going wrong? And I can sort it out because I can sort of think through the rules of composition and say, okay, I'm placing this bird in completely the wrong spot or whatever it is, and sort of readjust that way. So knowing the rules can help you make small adjustments, but you're probably already doing it in a lot of ways already. Wow.
Christine, the people have spoken. They would like you to start a YouTube channel. Let us know if we can help in any way.
That would be a lot. I'd have to figure that out.
It definitely, you have all of the pieces. You're not afraid to be on camera. You explain things clearly. And it's been a joy having you on. And I know you've helped so many people today. So,
well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Do you have a question here?
Okay.
So this one is from Patty. She says, Christine, I've always heard you should get the eyes moving up and to the left. What do you think?
So not necessarily. It depends on if you're going to have something grounded there. Certainly if you have something that catches their attention, you can send them back that way. The Baroque artists would use it. They would have figures looking up at nothing. And the reason for that was they were attempting to, and this is going into art history, not necessarily composition, but the reason for that is they were trying to indicate that the presence of the divine was there even if you couldn't see it. Previously in the Renaissance, figures looking up were looking at an actual image of Madonna and Child or whatever it was. And in the Baroque period, they were losing a lot of faithful to the Catholic Church. And so they started having a lot of figures looking up to indicate that they didn't have to see it. People didn't have to see it for it to exist. But as far as composition, I mean, if you have them looking up, you can have it looking up at you. And they're like, if you're playing, especially with t-shirt design, that can certainly work because they would bounce from a face to another face. But as far as looking up and to the left, it's not really something I'm aware of as a rule. And it can be dangerous if it leads them off of your composition. So if it takes them away from your image, then it's probably not something you want to do. But if you have something they're looking at that loops them back towards the image, it would work.
It seemed like kind of in line with that. It seemed like most of the examples you gave, it was counterclockwise. Like the movement would go in a counterclockwise direction. Mm-hmm. Is that just coincidence or is that common? That it's normally that direction?
That is coincidence. I don't think it's normally that direction because you can have movement going in any direction you would like. Even the boat I showed was moving towards the right, and our eyes would move towards the right with it.
Okay.
It was just coincidence of having those the particular images I chose.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. Was there anything that you wanted to talk about that we haven't covered yet, or anything you wanted to add?
I will say that anybody can be an artist. So I have a lot of people that tell me they could never be an artist because they can't draw in a straight line. That's great. I can't draw in a straight line either. And it just, it's muscle memory. So it's like music or dance or martial arts. It's all muscle memory, and that's all art is. It's just muscle memory. It's teaching your muscles to react. If you want to draw a circle, they know how you want to draw a circle, and that's all it is. And so if you want to be an artist, everybody can be an artist.
Perfect. I think we should end it there. What do you think, Christina?
We did get one other question.
Okay, go ahead.
That just popped up. Sorry. We've got one that says, this is from Dwayne. It says, do you have any design elements that may increase merch sales on t-shirts?
As far as merch by Amazon, probably not. Merch seems to, a lot of my more artistic designs on merch don't necessarily work. Some of them do, but a lot of them don't. And so I don't know that I'd be the best one to ask, and haven't quite figured out that specific market, if that makes sense. So
yeah, no problem.
But in theory, any of these rules could work if you hit the right sort of target audience.
Absolutely.
Amazing.
Man.
And guys, I think that's a lesson all by itself. Like if you are having trouble on Merch by Amazon, there's so many other platforms. There's so many other ways. So don't get discouraged. There's a way to make it work for you.
Yes, absolutely.
So,
yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Christine. Anytime you want to come back, you're more than welcome anytime. I'm sure there's a lot more art lessons we all need to learn. So anytime you want to come back, and let us know whenever you get the YouTube channel going, and we'll make sure to share it. I'm just going to say it as if it's happening because I need to. Or we could have meetups and meet you in person wherever you are.
All right. And just learn that way. Yeah, I should relook at, I guess, getting because I have an actual Facebook art page, but I haven't touched it in months. And so it's not one that I would recommend following right now. But maybe I should look at restarting that.
Yeah, that's true. You could do Facebook Lives. It doesn't have to be YouTube, anything.
Yeah.
But it's really helpful. And I think a whole nother side is just talking to artists about mindset, because there's very few artists with your mindset that I've met. And it's so super valuable to let artists know that they can still do their passion, but get their art into the world. It doesn't have to be just, in their closet somewhere. It's getting your art out is such a gift. So
there's I think a lot of artists who you're right that don't do that and haven't figured out how to sort of mirror that or what to do. And I think there's a lot of artists that were never taught branding either, and so they're sort of floundering in the same way that I was.
And I think it's more than that, is that they think of branding or marketing or selling as all like negative things, instead of thinking of it as getting their art into the world. They're thinking like, oh, I don't want to be selfish, or I don't want to make money on this, or I don't want it to be a business. I just want it to be my passion, which is fine. It's just that if you leave your passion just in your house somewhere where no one's ever going to see it, it's not as nice as if you could get it out into the world. I mean, we all love the art from the Renaissance or from whenever, because that art has somehow been shown to the world, whether it was the artist or someone finding it later. At least now it's being shown to the world. So a lot of artists do get discovered after they die. They never do get their artwork out into the world while they're still alive.
That's very true. It's a joke in the art community that the quickest way to get famous is to die, and then your artwork will go everywhere.
Well, it's because of the mindset that for some reason getting your artwork out is bad, because somehow that involves selling and marketing and all this other stuff. But nowadays it's easier to get your artwork out without having to, cater to some gallery somewhere or something. Like, you can do it any way you want to, just like how you've tied in the environment and hiking and all this stuff. Artists can tie in all different ways, but they're able to get their artwork out before they die, which is nice.
Right. Yeah, that's the ideal, is for us to, have people see our stuff before we die.
Yeah. Exactly. So I think both of those angles. 2 YouTube channels. Next time I talk to you, 2 separate topics. Artist mindset and actual art skills.
Yes.
Maybe I could put that all together somehow.
You could, but I think those are two things that I see that you have that most artists do not. So I think that is very powerful if you get that out there.
Yes.
So thank you so much for being on the show.
It's an honor.
You.
Yes,
thank you so much to everybody watching. And I hope that all of you guys have a good night. And thank you so much, Christine.
Yeah, thank you. Y'all take care.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Good night.